So when I tend to envision this story right now, I wonder where I would find myself in the setting. As I wander through the olive trees of Gethsemane, who am I with? I would imagine being in the space of Jesus, just off in the distance, and I wonder, would I be with him or the disciples? When I bring myself back to this present moment, I recognize that I carry a heaviness in my body. The heaviness contains grief, anger, and energy that has been with me for several months now. There's a space of continuous discomfort that I'm responsible for facing, and it's something that I ask that you join with me in facing that today. There is a Chilean performance artist. Her name is Maria Jose Contreras, and she spent her youth living under the US-backed Pinochet dictatorship. And much of her work grapples with the act of witnessing and seeing and the work of memory and the power that it has, and all that gets placed in the body because of it all. One of her projects occurred in 2013, and it's called Querer no ver. It was a collective embodied protest bringing attention to the over 2,000 Chilean detenidos desaparecidos, people deliberately kidnapped, imprisoned, and murdered by the Pinochet regime. So a diverse group of Chileans, some of whom were family or friends of the desaparecidos, gathered in Santiago, in a busy section of the city. And then for 11 minutes, marking September 11th, 1973, the day of the coup, they laid or sat down in a line as a form of embodied protest. It was the 40th anniversary of the coup, and it confronted the silence that still existed regarding all these disappeared people who had not been found. Now, as Contreras made clear, there were those in Chile who did not want to pay attention to this major injustice that had occurred. There were all these events marking this 40th anniversary, but this part of it ended up kind of swept under the rug, even though the state was responsible for dealing with it. So in the acts of remembrance that year, top government officials tried very hard to skirt around these horrors, and it bothered Contreras. And she decided protest was a way to confront this ignoring ignorance. So she said, many generals have sworn during these years that they were not aware of the violations of human rights at that time. Inconceivable, considering the hierarchical structure of the armed forces. This unacceptable minimization and cover-up motivated me to create and promote Querer no ver as a way of contesting denial. A 2-kilometer line of bodies displayed in the city intended to challenge the narrative of desaparecidos as a marginal effect, to give evidence that the missing were the result of clear state policy. The name of the performance is provocative. If you claim you didn't know about the desaparecidos 40 years ago, then you just didn't want to see. And that is what Querer no ver translates to, as wanting not to see. So I see this as a witnessing event that connects to Gethsemane. Jesus knew he was to be crucified by the Roman Empire, so he went to the olive trees in mourning and prayer. The disciples came with him, but they were not really there with him. They were not present in the grief-filled state of Jesus. The disciples were tired and ignorant of what was about to happen to Jesus, which, if they had been paying attention through his ministry, should have known the enormous risk that was Jesus. Jesus prays through the night multiple times in despair, and a few times he returns to his disciples who keep falling asleep, and he calls for them to be present, but they continue not to get it. They keep falling asleep. The disciples were wanting not to see. So, looking at this biblical story and learning about Contreras' collective embodied protest, I bring us back to the space we occupy as witnesses. As a theologian, ethicist, and writer, I would not be doing what I feel called to do if I did not speak about how Palestine weaves into all of this. There are over 30,000 Palestinians killed in Gaza. We are witnessing a lot of denial, obscuring, name-calling, and much more that's meant to place us in this position of the disciples, wanting us to not see, putting us in positions of wanting not to see. We do not want to always see this grief and this pain, and especially there's the collective rage generated in these times, all hard to witness to. So in the choices of witnessing, we take on the collective weight of what Jesus carried, an intense mourning, with the knowledge that he was about to be harshly targeted by the time morning came around. Now, I'm not calling us into some sort of redemptive suffering of obtaining a price of salvation or anything like that. What I mean by these words in this story is to communicate that our presence, work, activism, and learning about Palestine deeply matters. All our eyes on Palestine matters as we act as witnesses during this time. We must be present and we must witness, and to not do so means falling into any of the collective lessons of the past that lead to haziness, forgetfulness, and gaslighting. Contreras targeted the problem in her protests in Chile, and it still exists in the avoidance the U.S. has in trying to pretend it's living in post-racial times. So Jesus says, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch for me." My body feels that now. I am overwhelmed and consumed with grief, and I must witness a grief that is much greater than mine. Stay here and keep watch for me, Jesus says to his disciples. He required their presence, and they did not give it to him. So I ask that we join together throughout our days, centering a presence that recognizes Palestinian lives as unconditionally loved by God, the sacred, by whatever universal energy there is, just as other lives get held, holding to the possibilities of an equitable world where all can flourish without dispossession and exploitation. This work begins with presence, seeing, witnessing, and not falling asleep. And within that work, we have opened up the opportunity for us to live in a hope-filled solidarity with community and collective flourishing. So as I close us out of this sermon, may these words from Halal Aliyan ground us. To witness is to steward the truth. It is using the self, what it sees, what it knows, as evidence. This is how we build our capacity in this moment, by devoting ourselves to truth-seeking. It is to say, I will consider myself evidence of what is happening. I will remember what others have endured. I will speak of it. I will let it change me. Thank you.